Welcome, Wargamers. Doug here from 2 Plus Tough, and I want to talk about another game that I have fallen in love with. Again, I'm very easy to impress, and I'm talking about Call to Arms, the Elder Scrolls game. Now, I recently did a video this week talking about Fallout Wasteland Warfare, which is a very similar system. That one I had bought for myself. This one I want to thank Modifius for sending me out because they saw my interest in it and were ecstatic to have me on board. So they sent me this and a few other expansions, and I wanted to talk about the similarities and differences between the two systems and give you a sense for what Call to Arms is all about. Much like Fallout Wasteland Warfare, Call to Arms is a small skirmish game where you and your opponent are vying for control of Tamriel. You're trying to basically plunge dungeons and explore cave systems and all this kinds of stuff. All different ruins and quests that you can go on, but the way that they go about these systems is a little bit different. So what I want to do is talk about what Call to Arms is on its own, and then I'm actually going to do a separate video comparing the two and pros and cons and all that. To put it very briefly, this is a tabletop representation of Skyrim the game. Okay, I know it's Call to Arms. I know it could take place technically anywhere, but it's Skyrim. I'm just going to call it Skyrim, all right? Your forces you have are Stormcloaks and Imperials. You have the Dark Brotherhood. You have bandits. Like just all the things that you experience in Skyrim. There's shouts. You could be the Dragonborn. It's Skyrim, right? Let's just be honest. So it's a little bit more situated into a singular game timeline. That's totally okay though. Games are played between like 5 to 12 models max, and essentially if you're going with the battle mode, they're supposed to be equal point levels between you and your opponent, and if you're going through the campaign mode, which is sort of a delving system, the point restrictions are a little more loosey-goosey, but also you're trying to tell a story, so you go from one mission to the next and complete quests in that way. So for example, a quest might be find a word of power on a wall, right? This is like the basic mission of all Skyrim quests, really. So your first thing is going to be getting into the cave. The second one's going to be finding the place where you put the dragon claw into the puzzle door. The third one's going to be beating the boss, and then you can get the dragon reward. So it takes a mission from the video game and compartmentalizes it into segments for a tabletop skirmish game. When you link them together, you have told a singular story of diving into a dungeon and getting a reward. As you would expect from this game, you have the same stats and everything like that you would have in Skyrim. You have access to special abilities by using fatigue and magicka. Those things regenerate throughout the game as opposed to health, which does not. And you have spells, you have all different kinds of melee and ranged weapons, you have divine weapons, all these kind of crazy things that are really cool. All the things that you love about the Elder Scrolls series put into a tabletop form. I'll be honest, I would have loved it if they just released a Morrowind wave. Morrowind is my jam. So what I'm going to do is bust out one of the character cards and we can walk through to basically understand how things work. You have the same attributes in this game as you do in Skyrim, and it's simply a matter of skill tests to do anything in the game. So I'll show you what I mean. And here we are at the downward cam taking a look at some of how these things work. Here is the player card for the Dragonborn. I did the Soul Survivor in the Fallout one. We'll do the Dragonborn here. Now, essentially they work the exact same way. Here are your attributes, and running alongside those are a variety of icons. Every weapon, every item, everything has icons that tell you which things you have access to. For example, this is a steel axe. You can see the little hand holding a sword, which means he's going to use this stat, strength, to roll to see if he can actually hit with the sword. Same thing with the bow. The Dragonborn's bow symbol is on their agility, so they're going to use that stat. So we're going to put this down here, and I'm going to walk you through how these stats and modifiers work because I love the system that Modifius implemented. Essentially, every action in the game comes down to a skill check. When to do that, let me get this guy out here. You're going to roll this. This is a 20-sided die, but only 10 of the sides actually have numbers. They go 1 through 10, and then the other sides all have little individual, this is a critical success, the X is a critical fail, there's a potion sign so you can get a free action. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do with these things. What you're trying to do is roll equal to or lower than the characteristic number. So if we were using our steel war axe, let's just do this proper, we would need to roll a 5 or lower because this icon's here. This is the skill we're testing. Boom, we got a 3. Totally land it, they hit with the axe. There's a bit more to it than that, though, because just like Wasteland Warfare, these weapons and items and everything, they all tell you what dice to roll that modifies this. So for example, you're not really just rolling the skill test. The axe is going to roll 1 green die and 2 yellow. I'm not sure if those symbols actually show up for you, but they are written right here. Sorry about that. But if we roll all of them, and this is perfect. So our stat is 5, so we need to roll 5 or less. We rolled a 6, but you see the green die is a accuracy modifier, which means you deduct 2 from this score. So our 6 becomes 4. 4 is equal to or less than 5, so the attack is successful. As far as damage goes, yellow dice, typically yellow, black, and red, are the ones that track damage. So in this attack, we would do 2 damage. So each little star represents 1 damage. If it was like this, where there's 2 stars, this would be 3 damage. It's that simple. The dice tell you everything to apply. So it's just a simple matter of learning how to basically read the dice and weapon stuff and then just applying it. It's very straightforward. Now what's interesting, and you can't really quite see it, unfortunately, on this card, but there's a little like symbol. It's a helmet with 2 horns, and next to it, it says bleed. This is how the game implements special effects. So if we go back to our dice here, if we had rolled this, which is 1 wound, 1 wound, and then that symbol, it's a little helmet with the 2 horns, you would apply whatever effect was next to that symbol on the card. In this case, it would cause 2 wounds, and the target would start bleeding because it was a nasty, savage attack. And really, honestly, everything in the game works with this system. It is the sole, I guess the skill check system is really the crux of the entire DNA of the game. Everything else you're moving around, you can either test against attributes, you can test skills, so some things might give you, you swing better when you use a one-handed swinging weapon. Well, that would modify this roll, but not necessarily the strength stat as a whole. There are ways to equip weapons, which I love, and that's not in Fallout in the same way. So, for example, this is a one-handed weapon. Boom, right there, you put it in your hand. If you have a second axe, a steel war axe, you can do this, and you can dual wield. There are different perks and things like that you have to get to be able to use some of those things, but the option is there, and I love that. Now, in addition to that, there are, of course, ranged weapons. So we have here a simple hunting bow. And the way this works is very, very similar. The only thing it adds is ranges. So there's a short range and a long range. If the model is kind of crossing or straddling short and long range, like say it's 10, I don't know, the model's width and the 10-inch mark is right in the center, you can choose to use whichever profile you want. Keep in mind, some tend to be obviously better than others. So we would do, if they're in short range, I'm going to read out the dice because I know you guys can't see them. We would obviously roll a skill die. We would roll a green die for accuracy because they're nice and close, and a red die for damage. The different colors of dice are yellow, red, black, and green. Green is your modifier for accuracy. Yellow will do the least amount of damage. They even have blank sides that do nothing. Red does more damage than yellow, and the black does all kinds of hella messed up damage. So black dice are the best. At short range, you're going to roll an accuracy die and a red die. At long range, it gets a little bit weaker, so you would roll an accuracy die and a yellow die. There you go. And that's all there is to it. So if you're within 12 inches, you would use the long range. Short range is 10. It changes weapon to weapon, but you get what I'm saying. Just like with melee weapons, these ones do also have little symbols next to them. There's the helmet with the 2 horns and a symbol with 2 swords that are crossed, just like you see here on this die. Now, they work the exact same. The only thing I will add is that if you roll both of them, like let's say we did this, right? That's one of each symbol. You will have to choose which one activates. You can't double tap it, but honestly, typically there's like an immediate winner. So this one is piercing 2. The swords crossing are more rare than the helmet with the horns. So if you get this, it's an obvious choice. It's going to pierce twice as much armor as the helmet. So even though it might seem like, oh man, I rolled super hot and I got all these effects and I have to choose one, typically a lot of times they're very similar effects. One is just better. And what they're doing is counting on the odds of rolling them to differentiate how powerful a critical attack kind of will be. And lastly are items, which typically show up as a free action type of thing where you can always just chug a potion. And again, it tells you how to do this. One use, free action, restore yellow die health points. So you would roll yellow die, boom, we would heal 2 health. So at this point, you can really see they're using these dice with the wounds and the modifiers and the special symbols to articulate the different weapons and effects and healing and devastation that are in the game. Now, I just wanted to show off a few other things that are in here to give you a sense of the depth of this sucker. Okay, so let me pull those up. You have everything, of course, from weapons to all the different types of armor in Skyrim. Shields, stabs, mage's robes, all that stuff is there. The mage's robes are interesting because they actually modify some of your magical abilities. And there's this fat stack of spells. This is like dozens and dozens of spells, and there's more added with every single expansion that they come out with. And it's just simple stuff. If you're within 6 inches, you roll this, and it adds fire damage. You can boost things with magic by putting more magic into an attack. You can boost it to do more damage, all this kinds of stuff. So there's magic is kind of its own jam in this system. I'm not going to go too into the weeds on that. But it is a very cool thing that you can equip all these different spells and items. And when I say items, like there's even like a necklace, you know, the Amulet of RK, just regenerating health, all these kinds of things that just make stuff very, very interesting. If you are a fan of Skyrim or just the Elder Scrolls series in general, this is a phenomenal game because Fallout Wasteland Warfare, like I said, I'm going to do a comparison video separately, but it's a complex game that tries to represent all aspects of Fallout. Whereas I feel like Skyrim, Call to Arms specifically hones in on the dungeon crawler experience. When you do campaigns in this game, instead of having a base that you're building up, it's just your hero and their warband accruing items and money and going on huge quests that are multi-part, but from quest to quest, there's not a whole lot going on, like there's not a base being built or something like that. But from a narrative perspective of like telling the story of diving into a cave and fighting off bad guys and solving puzzles and all these kinds of things, it is a spot-on representation of Skyrim as a game. Personally, I like it from a gameplay perspective more than Fallout because it is a lot more simple, but it retains the things that make the game engine that Modiphius made really, really important. So for example, the AI, which I want to talk about right now. Modiphius has designed a really cool AI system for Call to Arms that essentially breaks characters down into aggressive or cautious, and that'll dictate how their actions go. You see, in Fallout Wasteland Warfare, that was kind of on a action-to-action basis. Are they going to act cautiously now or not? In Call to Arms, they simplified it to just being, is that person a cautious person or are they a aggressive type of fighter? And that's going to dictate whether or not they move towards cover, essentially. What I will say about the AI system here is that for the intents and purposes of dungeon diving, where it really is going to be just you versus enemies trying to punish you for coming into their home, I think it does a fantastic job. So like Draugr that are archers are going to try and stay back and fire arrows, whereas ones with melee weapons are going to bolt towards you and punch you in the face. It really is that simple. It really does matter what they're armed with. I would say it's a very streamlined system compared to Fallout Wasteland Warfare, because it is more focused on the, I guess dungeon diving than it is so much the world exploration. But that being said, they still have all the things that you would expect, and even more so because this includes things like traps and side quests. There's a bunch of weapons. What do I have here? There's faction abilities for the adventurers, Imperial Legions, Stormcloaks, Draugr, Beasts, and Monsters. What else is in front of me? I got a whole heckin' ton of cards here. That's one thing you do have to get used to is there's like 1,000 of these little cards. You're not going to use them all at once. You're going to have small piles of like 3 or 4, so it's very manageable. But there's a whole lot to cover. Now, what's nice in terms of replayability, though, is that you see all these cards right here that I'm filtering through. These are all the available quests that just come in the core set. And of course, whenever they add an expansion and new types of fighters and new waves of stuff, there's always more quests, there's always more items, there's always more shouts, there's all this kinds of stuff. Speaking of shouts, I did actually want to mention this. Where is it at? They do actually have, 4 dragon shouts that come in the base thing. But what's cool about them is that they have 3 different, steps to them. So in Skyrim, if you're familiar, a dragon shout is composed of 3 words. So Fus is the first one you learn. By the end of the game, Fus Ro Da, which is the first, the big dragon shout that pushes people away and is quite honestly my favorite. They have the same thing where they have different costs and then the effects of them. So this is Frost Breath. You're going to do frost damage with a green and a yellow die, then a green and a red if you do 2 letters, and then green and black if you do all 3 words of power into a dragon shout. So just get progressively better if you remember what I'm talking about with the different colored dice. What's really cool is that there's actually one that I love. It's just called Throw Voice, where you can trick the AI, which is an interaction that I don't think we see enough of from games that have a solo mode. You essentially project your voice from a different direction, so all of the AI opponents will activate towards that point rather than coming towards you. To be honest with you, I'm exceptionally excited about this game because it takes I originally bought Fallout Wasteland Warfare, but it is a very crunchy game with a lot of details. This is much more streamlined because it's trying to give you a specific experience, and I think it absolutely nails it. It has the best things of item diversity and the ways that you can kit out your heroes and go on these quests, and there's plenty of things to do within the game, but it does so in a much more concise way. And I think that's probably the best word to describe these two in comparison is concise. Now, I try to be as honest as I can in these reviews. There is a learning curve to any Modiphius game. I mean, really any game, obviously. But with these kinds of games, because you are looking at the way that they represent dice and special effects and things like that, it's almost like Call to Arms has its own game language, and you have to learn that language to be able to play. We did an example before where I was going through the weapons, right? It says roll a green die and a yellow. This means you're going to hit more accurately and possibly do more damage. You need to understand how to read those things very, very well to be able to fully experience the game. I'm going to be honest, it is easier in Call to Arms than it is in Fallout Wasteland Warfare. But once you get the hang of that, it really, really opens up a lot of opportunities for you. Because all of a sudden you can have a Dragonborn, he's got a fireball in one hand, an axe in the other, you're flaming people in the face, you're hitting them with an axe, you're moving forward, you do a dragon shout, you get hit by an arrow, but you're wearing heavy armor. All of those things can happen very, very easily and simply once you learn how to do all the rolling for them and you're able to look at an item card and be like, I know how to do that. So once you get past that initial hurdle of learning how to decipher the cards and equip things, the game is actually very simple and straightforward because the cards and the dice literally tell you everything to do, right? I mean, it cannot be more simple than that. If you roll a die and it has this little symbol, you do a wound. That's it. If you roll the symbol with 2 stars, you do 2 wounds. That's it. And so from that point, it becomes a really cool, almost tabletop version of the video game where you're doing an action, seeing how it pans out, recording it. Doing an action, seeing how it pans out, recording it. And those actions are moving the story along through a bunch of different narrative means. So for me personally, I thoroughly enjoyed Call to Arms. I had planned on doing some content surrounding Fallout Wasteland Warfare, more for modeling's sake. I really like the aesthetic of Fallout as a setting. In terms of gameplay, I love Skyrim. I love Skyrim. I love so much. I love the Call to Arms version of it. The dice thing, because they're D6s instead of D12s, and there's a lot fewer symbols to have to juggle, and the way that they've streamlined AI reactions and that kind of stuff. It is a game that is just begging to be played online for battle reports and things like that, and I would love to do that. So if you have an interest in watching those, please let me know. I would love to do some. For me in particular, I'm less interested in playing as the Dragonborn. I'm more interested in playing as the Stormcloaks. I'm actually thinking about taking my Stormcloaks and painting them as one of my favorite cities, Riften from Skyrim, because they kind of have the same thing. They're just not wearing blue. It's the same armor and everything like that. So just having all kinds of fun with that, kind of making a joke out of some of the things But it's just so much fun to explore these worlds, and you get to do what the characters do, which is just go out, quest, explore, get wins, get gains, and then get shouts. Every time they release an expansion for the game, it basically comes out as like a thick deck of cards. And those cards will have new characters, new items, new spells, new shouts, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it really is a full-bodied supplement for a game system rather than like a new unit, right? I mean, it comes out with models as well, but it's not like dropping a new unit will drastically change the gaming space. You need to have items and quests to make those units stand out against a backdrop, and they think they do that really well. So friends, that is my little chat here about Call to Arms, the Elder Scrolls, totally not Skyrim game. It's Skyrim. No one really argues that. I think it's funny that they call it something different. But go ahead and just let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see battle reports for this. I would probably try to get some voice actors on board to help me with that, so they don't all sound like me. This ain't Morrowind. We only have one voice actor. And we will go ahead and do that. And if you have any questions about the game and its mechanics and its replayability and stuff, go ahead and ask them, and I will be happy to answer you. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.